All right, everyone, let's go ahead and kick things off. So welcome to the How I Automate My Work with AI webinar series. This is going to be 5 events this week, every single day at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Super excited to kick off the first session here with Vince Stewart, Director of Fulfillment Operations at Vacation Inc. Vince, thanks a ton for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Glad you had me.
Amazing. So just to kick off with a quick agenda here, we'll be starting with some quick intros before I share just a little bit of primer context on Parabola before Vince really throws you into the deep end with some of these flows. The two AI-enabled automations we'll talk about today. The first one is going to be Vince's OTIF reporting flow, and the second will be his ship-to-deliver analysis workflow. And then we'll try to save 5 to 10 minutes at the end for a little bit of Q&A. To get into some intros here, my name is Adam Racefield. I've been with Parabola for just over 4 years, and I lead product marketing here at Parabola. And I'm joined by Vince. Vince, we'll give you a chance to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, I'm Vince Stewart. I'm the Director of Fulfillment Ops, as Adam said, at Vacation, sunscreen company. I'm somewhere around my 9-month mark, 10-month mark. I've lost total track of time being in deep peak of sun season, but I've been in this role the whole time. For those of you probably wondering what the heck is fulfillment operations, because operators have many different roles. So here at Vacation, that means I own all movement of goods. Once they are finished, put in a case and on a pallet, I own getting those into our 3PL network, put on a shelf, and then when customers order, so DTC, FBA, retail customers, you name it, I own getting those orders out the door on time and in full. And then I also pick it up on the back end. So if a retailer customer believes that we did not follow our compliance requirements, I own the chargebacks and deductions and dispute process as well.
Amazing. And Vince, just to give people a sense for the scale that Vacation Inc. is operating at, can you share a little bit about just size of the business and the size of your team specifically?
Yeah, we're definitely in the 7-figure for sure. Definitely pushing that now. Definitely had a huge growth this year over last, and then we're planning for even more. So we're very much in that grow rocket ship phase right now. We're a company that is omni-channel by nature. Started off on DTC like many of our ilk, but have really started to expand doors and distribution within retail. So you can find us in most of the brick and mortar formats right now. So we're in mass retail, drug, club. I'm sure I'm missing some, but yeah, I'm like our grocery is a big one, and then boutique. So think even the bigger quote unquote boutique legacy department stores, but then also in your mom and pop one-off boutiques all across the country, across the world, honestly. So we do ship internationally as well. So you can find us almost everywhere. And then I forgot my baby, if you will, which is Amazon. So we're very much on Amazon, expanding our assortment there. So if you can't find Vacation, I'm not sure you're looking hard enough.
Sounds like it's super simple to just fulfill for a couple channels.
So simple.
Amazing. And maybe just to round us out here, can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing before you joined Vacation?
Yeah, so I was doing a fairly similar role at Harry's, the razor company, but I only owned the FBA business as well as DTC, and then chargebacks, deductions again over there. But I've spent my whole career basically doing operations. I'm one of like the 50% or so operators I've met over my career that kind of backed our way into operations some way, shape, or form. Started out my career at Dick's Sporting Goods doing what I didn't know at the time was inbound logistics, getting stuff in the car or containers across the sea in the port. Spent a bunch of years doing all kinds of operations at McMaster-Carr Supply Company, the industrial supply company. But found my love for fulfillment ops, working in the warehouse day by day. Spent, 4 years doing that, filling, packing, all that. Hung out at Uber for a bit doing logistics operations there. Made my way to Harry's and now at Vacation. So I think I've touched every type of operation you could probably think of.
There we go. We're lucky to have you here today. And before we get into the flows, I just want to give you a quick less than 2-minute overview of Parabola, just so you understand exactly what Vince is showing you as we get into it here. So I'm going to open up a nice simple flow here. And if this is your first time seeing Parabola Parabola is an AI-enabled workflow builder that makes it easy to organize and transform messy data from anywhere, including emails, PDFs, spreadsheets, APIs, you name it, to really automate the work that you always thought was going to be manual. So the kind of foundational building blocks of Parabola are going to be 4 steps, the first of which are steps to actually pull in data. In this example here, where we're reconciling a packing list, you can see we're pulling in data from a PDF where we're using AI to actually automatically extract information from this PDF just by typing in exactly what we'd like to pull off of the data set. But we also could be pulling data from places like Shopify, NetSuite, Google Sheets, so on and so forth. Once we've actually pulled in all of that data, then we basically do everything you'd otherwise do in spreadsheets, right? Your VLOOKUPs, your formulas, and those are all going to happen with these transformation steps that you see here. So maybe we want to join up 2 data sets based on SKU, or maybe we want to use something like this custom transform step where I can just type in plain language exactly what we'd like to automate. And then behind the scenes, we're using AI to translate your instructions into custom code that's applied against your data set. The third step in Parabola, these are going to be steps to actually action on your data. That could include sending an email to the team to notify the team about delayed fulfillments. Maybe we're creating visualizations, or you could send, Slack messages, update Google Sheets, so on and so forth, really wherever that data needs to go. Fourth and finally are going to be these cards. These are used to really document our process and make it so that anyone else on the team can jump into a workflow and understand exactly how it works. And if you're building something like this for the first time, all you need to do to actually build a flow is just describe in plain language what you'd like to build. So in this example, I said, help me build a packing list reconciliation. And Parabola will use our kind of deep collection of use case specific knowledge to actually add steps directly to the canvas and help you start building that flow. With all of that context out of the way, let's get to the fun part here. Vince, the first use case we're going to talk about is going to be PO level OTIF reporting. Maybe you can kick us off by just telling us what the heck PO level OTIF reporting is.
Yeah, no, for sure. So in past lives, we've called this metric perfect order rate or something of that ilk. But here at Vacation, what this is a very high bar we set for ourselves for being perfect at the total PO level, regardless of customer. And therefore that means a DTC order counts just the same. So it counts as one, just as a retail order, regardless of how many items are on those orders. We have tracked and continue to track at the unit level as well, which puts a lot of weighting into our big retail customers are ordering tens of thousands of units at a time. But we prefer this metric because it allows us to see holistically how we're performing and how many customers ultimately that we are either satisfying or not satisfying through our fulfillment operations. So PO level in a nutshell is we look at did the order and every line and every unit on the order deliver or ship on time? So we are a collect vendor for most of our customers. So did we ready it on our dock and was it ready to ship per the PO or within our SLA for our DTC customers? If the answer is yes, awesome. You have OT equals 1 or yes. Then we go to the other side in full. So did every line ship 100% for what was ordered? There's a nuance here where since we are using the source, which is our mainly our 3PL's OMS system, we can only report on what they see. So we're creating cuts for our retail customers before we push the orders into our 3PL system. We're kind of blind to that, but we track that in another way. But largely what we're showing here is once we have agreed to or aligned on this is the quantity we can ship, did we actually ship in full? So we said we were going to ship 100. Did we ship 100? Or did we have to cut because our inventory was wrong? We only had 98 in stock. Or did we cut because we thought we reserved items, but they actually shipped on another customer came in and kind of took those items or what have you, or there's a bunch of damages or what have you. So this gives us at least a view on what we promised the buyers at our customers. Ultimately, what did we actually ship? Again, line by line, yes, no. And then we just go through at the PO and say, is every line one or yes for OT and one or yes for IF? If yes, then the whole PO is in full, or OTIF, on time in full. If even one unit is off, the entire PO gets dinged and it gets counted against.
Amazing. So making sure for every PO that you're fulfilling for one of your partners, yes, it's on time, but even more so, we're actually delivering 100% of what we promised.
Yep.
And we probably have a bunch of operators on the call thinking, hey, why do you need AI for this? I already do this manually. Excel's my best friend. We're good to go. Can you maybe just share a little bit about what your process looked like before you were using Parabola to do this manually before we get into the flow?
Yeah, we're talking, I don't know, at least 4 hours of my time every Monday, Tuesday, just pulling data from at least a few different sources. Even within sources, having dates that are in different formats that you have to get into a singular way so you can actually do the right math. Pulling in the sheets typically, especially in peak, you're talking about many rows and many cells of data. So even Google Sheets will tap out or takes a while to run. So locking up my computer was another pain point I had. So I would lock up my computer. Um, you also have the issue of Excel is actually good at some of this stuff and Sheets is better at others. So going back and forth. But then ultimately just spending a lot of time just cleaning data and aggregating data and getting into a singular set of columns that makes sense and ensuring that actually everything's there. Whereas now all of that is done Monday morning when I come in, I run within half an hour. It's all there, and I can spend a lot of my time just auditing, make sure everything is the way it looks, and then really spend most of my day on reporting and the so what work.
Amazing. So focusing from the data collection to actually auditing results, taking action, so on and so forth.
Yeah,
Let's go ahead and take a look at what this actually looks like. So
yeah,
here is Vince's PO level OTIF summary flow. Obviously, there is a lot going on here, and we're going to walk through all the steps. But just to start at the end here and work our way back, here we can see that we're calculating a couple different KPIs. We're creating a visualization. Vince, can you give us a sense for what we're actually looking at here?
yeah, for sure. I'll start with the bottom chart. I'm very visual. My team is fairly visual as well. So being able to see the line chart over time, that pink is what our PO level number is on a monthly basis. I can also see it on a weekly basis and have cuts for that. But every month, what are we tracking towards? And if our goal is 98%, for some of our business, 97% overall, how are we trending towards that? And if we're not there, what month pulled us down just to be able to tell the story and have the rolling story over time. So you can see we had a not a great January, if you will, just getting into the peak, but we've been constantly getting better and better and hitting our 97% most of the time. But this is one thing that we track overall, and that 96.1 is ultimately a goal that we have. That's my main KPI. So for me and my one person direct team, that's the number that we're looking at really every day, but at least once a week to report on and see how we're doing. And to be able to explain and be held accountable for if we're not where we need to be. Why is that? Um,
Amazing.
so yeah.
Very cool. So zooming out for a quick second, let's talk about how we actually got there. Our data source here looks simple. We're just pulling from a Parabola table, which is kind of like a database that lives inside Parabola. But the flow actually feeding this has a lot going on in and of itself. So Vince, maybe you can tell us what data we're working with here.
Yeah. Yeah. So the source of that parabola table is a beast. I wouldn't give it to my worst enemy to try to piece together or try to clean it up. But in a nutshell, what that's doing is every hour it is pinging the API that we're linked into for our 3PL's order management system and pulling in all orders that have been received within the past 90 days. And it's making updates. So as statuses of orders that are already in the system or already in my list are there, it's replacing the status. So if something was not shipped the last hour and it's shipped within the hour, it will update that status for me, but also bring in new orders across all of the customers that 3PL is operating for. It's doing some of the cleaning in there. So it's doing a lot of date cleaning. So that's one of the sources where the dates are in many different formats. So getting them all into a singular date format, year, month, day, so that we actually can do the transforms and the calculations and the compares for throughout the rest of the flow. It's also tagging orders based off our customers and logic I put in there so that I can know these orders are target orders or these orders are Ulta orders or what have you, DTC
Yep.
orders. Based off certain characteristics, so that we can then slice and dice the data against those customers as well. And then finally, what it's doing is it's creating a rolling database, if you will, that I can then query off of on this flow or really any other flow. So that flow is really a foundational flow within our entire operation. It running that frequently allows us to run other views, not just for on time and full, but also our inventory on hand, which is another big flow and report that we generate and are held accountable to. So it is a it is the granddaddy of them all, if you will, that allows us to do a lot of this work, but actually really automate and use up or take up most of those 4 hours or so that it was taking me before to aggregate data.
Amazing. So once we actually have that consolidated OTIF source table, then in this flow, we're doing things like cleaning up our column values. We are filtering for specific POs. We're removing records we don't want to look at. We're filtering for specific date values and cleaning up some SKUs. As we kind of progress through the flow, we start to get into some interesting date math in this section. Maybe you can kind of talk to us about days shipped past required, and then kind of walk us through what else we're doing in this section of the flow.
Yeah, so this is one of those compare steps that I was doing. So based off of what we calculated as the end ship, and I guess one big transformation is doing in that bigger flow, that foundational flow, is it's also working our end ships around holidays. So if an end ship date is set for a holiday, so we just had Memorial Day in the US, for anyone that's not in the US on the webinar, our 3PL is closed. We were closed. So any end dates there need to be worked around there. So we just update our SLA to give us the grace and to work through the expectation of shipping out there. So it does all of that work as well. This compare step then just says, okay, once I know that something is shipped, how many days after or before the end ship date did we ship? Because we do have customers that actually ding us on the other end when we ship too early. Right. So this allows us to do the very quick math to say, hey, how many days are we off? And then we use that very quick math. If we're at 0 or negative, I was on time. If I have more days, so if I was even 1 day past, I'm not on time. Right. I did not meet my expectation. So it's just creating that binary row level OT is that binary 1-0 that it's putting in there, that middle step. Then IF is the same thing. So we have a field within our data that's called quantity or item quantity canceled. So it's just looking at that column and doing very simple. That number is 0, cool. We ship that line in full. Whereas if it was anything other than 0, then we obviously canceled something off at the 3PL. I don't know exactly what that is yet, but or why we did it, but we need to. That will be IF equals 0. Combines those two. The next 2 steps is we just split that off to be able to create a simple for every PO now. So now let me, if our PO has 10 lines, let me get it down to 1 row and say, let me aggregate and say, is everything, like, is my average 1? If the average is 1, sweet, that means everything's on time. If it is not, then something has gone wrong. And it will say the PO is not on time, and does the same thing for in full. Then we just pull them back together, do another lookup in that step just to say, hey, for every row now, is OT equal 1? So PO level equals 1, IF equals 1. If yes, then the whole thing's 1. Right?
Yep. Amazing.
So transforms, I'll get into the audit piece in a second, because that's actually definitely I built in the past few weeks and actually saves a ton of more time. But then in the calculation side, it's now just very simple math, but it's doing it at scale, which is just saying, okay, for any given month, week, year, how many POs did I have? So how many unique POs did I have? How many were, so that's the denominator. And then the numerator is how many were fully on time. So OT equals 1, IF equals 1. And then just does simple division, and then gives me a percentage. One reason I'm glad you opened this up, because I think one thing that the AI steps has really helped me with is the formatting. So typically these would come out, so the percentages would come out in the whole number format. So it was 89%, it would be like 89 point whatever, which looks very weird, especially when you try to do some aggregation or some visualizations within Parabola. So forcing and using even the chatbot to help me put the exact language I need to get the AI to consistently, the AI step to consistently turn back this format. So 4 decimals, never give it to me above 1, allows all my visualizations to work further down the line, or aggregations to work further down the line.
Yeah, that's awesome. And very cool how here we're kind of just taking this natural language instruction, translating it into custom code. We're applying it to your data set. But let's say for some of this logic, you don't have a subject matter expert like Vince to kind of walk you through it, and you're trying to figure out your teammates' flow, like what are the actual calculations that we're doing here. Yes, you can zoom in, click step by step, and kind of deduce what's happening. You also can use this chat interface to just ask like, hey, what is happening in this section of the flow? What's happening in this card? And Parabola is actually going to provide you with a step-by-step summary here. So you're actually using AI to analyze your data, analyze your process, and get real-time answers to make it easier to kind of hand off these flows from teammate to teammate. And another area where you use some AI in some interesting ways here was with this trailing 4-week function here. Maybe you can talk about just kind of like what you're doing here and how this has really helped for dates as well.
Yeah, for sure. So the trailing 4 week is literally just the last 4 weeks completed. So if I'm sitting in a particular week, it's not going to include that week. It's just looking back to just give a more recent view. So the numbers, the math is exactly the same. It's just a more truncated view versus year to date. This card is what I use to report on every week. So I report on our trailing 4 week. I'll also report on our full year, so how we're tracking. But this is just a better way to see how have a little bit of recency bias and say recently, regardless of what happened in the past, how are we doing? Have we seen the improvements we thought we made in the operation? Are they driving the OT success? So it's the same exact math. Like I said, if you pull that AI, the first AI step, sorry, the other one. So this one here, so this one I'm using to use AI to be smart and to go in and tell me what are the last 4 trailing weeks before the AI steps. So when I originally built this, there was no AI chatbot. There were no AI steps. So I had probably 10 to 20 steps to try to do this. I would have to tag each row. What is the ship week? I'd have to do a compare to the current week. So how many weeks back am I? I'd have to do a filter step to say, okay, I only want rows that are between -4 and 0, right?
Yep.
Or sorry, -3 and 0. Right? And do all these steps, hope that they all, like nothing was lost in translation, and then get to this. Whereas and then I'd have to make sure that it did that every single time for every run. This one automatically updates. So once I've set this, I have not had to check it. I can trust that it's pulling in the trailing 4 weeks, so that when I get to, I also set my weeks to start on Monday, whereas the natural place to start is Sunday, but we don't operate on Sundays. So Monday is the more natural starting point for us. So I'm able to create that logic here and run it through.
I'm sure a lot of people
very easily. So let's say my boss, Michael, who's in the chat, like he says, hey, I actually want to look at my trailing 9 weeks for some reason, right? I could very easily come in, just copy this card, change the logic to look at the last 9 weeks, and within a run, have that information without issue.
I'm sure a lot of people on this call can empathize with dealing with annoying date functions, date formats, you name it, from carriers, 3PLs, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think the date thing was probably the thing that was the most frustrating getting in with Parabola. It's like I understand how Excel works, so I understand the steps, like what the step is trying to mirror within the spreadsheet or what the spreadsheet does. I understand. I've done a lot of SQL, so I can kind of get that coding piece of it. But it was just like every time you thought you had the dates fixed, there was one date or there was 5 dates out of the 100,000 that were in the wrong format. That screwed everything up. That made something fail along the way. So I think using the AI step has eliminated a lot of the need to have like multiple format steps or have a format date step that you have to put every iteration, right? 3 second spaces, 2-second spaces, two digits in the date field, 1 digit in the date field, and then all those permutations as well.
Totally. I don't think that date formatting is like a sexy LinkedIn topic for how to use AI, but in the world of operations, a lot of time that ends up becoming one of the most useful realities here. To keep us moving along, Vince, before I jump to ship to deliver flow, any kind of closing thoughts you have on this flow that you'd like to share?
Yeah. So one thing, so I see a question about how much or what other automation tools or platforms that I used before this. Answer is none. So I briefly explored Zapier at Harry's, but it honestly felt like a higher hill or a steeper hill to climb to learn than Parabola. How much experience building automation? None. But like I said, I was very familiar with Excel and Sheets and how they work. So I thought that at least gave me an upper hand. I wasn't starting fresh as someone new. So like had I had to do this in school, it would have taken me a lot longer if I didn't fully understand, right? But the other piece here is like the audit. So being able to spend more of my time, if you slide a little bit to the southwest, there we go. So previous week audit. So this is something that I run every Monday just to validate. So just to be able to validate that the information and the reporting that's coming out is accurate. So I can go in, use this format to be able to pull out a sample of orders across all of my customers, and then review them to go back into our 3PL system or go back into our customers' portals and transportation management systems to validate that what we're saying is on time is truly on time, or what have you.
That's awesome. Very cool. We appreciate you closing the loop there. This is definitely a really cool flow and one that we probably do have available in our use case library. So if you do want to take some sample data, try to build something like this yourself, definitely feel free to check that out. Without any further ado, we'll jump to ship to deliver. As you can see, another big flow here and some of my favorite visualizations of any parabola flow that I've seen. Vince, maybe we'll let you talk about kind of the output of this before we similarly work backwards.
Yeah, no, for sure. So ship to deliver is something that became dear to my heart in the waning days at Harry. So understanding that our speed was nowhere close to competitive with Amazon, Target, and Walmart, which were expanding and continued to expand at their same day ship from store options. I think our average there was somewhere in like the 6-7 day range. When I came to vacation, it's going to be funny to say, but happy to see that we had very similar kind of setup. So there was very much opportunity to start to push the boundaries of how we can get faster delivery across the contiguous US, at least to start, and do it in a way where we actually save money. So there's carriers out there. We're still in a shippers market. So there's carriers out there that are willing to give rates to shippers or via our 3PL. So it's finding those opportunities to have clear win-wins across the board. So when I looked at this, I always think in terms of distribution rather than averages. So typically when I see this or folks talk about average ship time, which is there. So our average calendar, and they also talk in days of business days. So Monday through Friday, excluding holidays. Whereas Amazon, for instance, actually delivers all 7 days. 3PLs are largely expanding weekend operations as well to be able to cover the weekend and ship much quicker. So I actually much prefer and have pushed vacation and our team to think in the terms of calendar days. And that's typically how customers think about it as well, regardless of how you communicate. They're thinking like a Saturday and Sunday is a day on any customer's calendar. They don't go away. So it's how do we think of and push the boundary on our performance and what we expect? Because ultimately, Amazon doing what they're doing has forced and will continue to force all of our hands to be able to perform to their level, or look each other in the eye and say that we're choosing not to, and understanding what that could mean for the business overall. So while I report the average, I also think in median or think in percentile. So median as really my middle point, and then I look at 90th as well. So what's kind of my outlier range? So what are the outliers of my customers? So ultimately, I care every customer. How are they experiencing the last piece of our experience on our website? And I'll be clear, this is really only for our DTC customers. I don't run this for any other customer. So once we brought on Amazon shipping as a relatively new add to our carrier base, I started to be able to report in that middle section. So this is a cumulative, if you scroll up a little bit. So this is a cumulative probability chart. So the black is Amazon shipping. So every point across the bottom is shipped to delivered. So how many days in calendar days. And then every data point is the percentile. So if you read, for instance, the 4 for Amazon is 80. So 80% of Amazon orders deliver in 4 days or less. So it's cumulative, right? To get to 100%. So 100% of Amazon orders deliver within 7 days. So a full week. You can see the farther left you have area, the better. So some of our other carriers aren't doing quite as hot.
Hear ya. And Vince, ultimately, we're building these visualizations to help us make better decisions, to help us drive down costs.
Exactly.
Can you just share a little bit about how your team actually actions on some of the reports that you're creating here?
Yeah, no, for sure. So one was expanding on Amazon, particularly. So I set a very aggressive goal for the end of the year. And again, this is our goal within Vacation Inc., which is by the end of the year, I want our weekly average of DTC orders delivering within 4 calendar days or less to be 80%. I came into the business at somewhere in like the 30 to 35% range. So that's a huge change. And that's one that you won't be able to do overnight. So using that goal and then using reporting like this is helping us push the boundary and understand how we're moving and how we're taking the steps to get there. A lot of that will be carrier. So how many more can we get more shipments and orders on Amazon being able to use this data to decide which orders aren't hitting a quicker service and why. Then it's also being able to tie this to a different flow that I have, which is invoicing, to be able to look at the cost benefit of moving shipments across carriers to hit this delivery. So it allows us to answer the question: how much should we be willing to pay, or do we need to be willing to pay to hit that mark? So we can have very good, interesting conversations. So we're well beyond how are we performing and talk about how do we perform better. I've also used this reporting to really drive our 3PL, who owns all of our logistics contracts right now, our carrier contracts, to help find these opportunities and these options for us and turn them on for us.
Yeah, to your point there, this is a real way to drive accountability with your 3PL network. You're showing them where they kind of lie in this distribution, and have really strong, reliable data to back it up. Just zooming out here for a quick second to kind of talk about how we ultimately got here. In this example, you're pulling from Blue Box API to ultimately pull in a lot of that shipping data. We're cleaning it, we're combining it, we're filtering out some specific orders. And then we're getting into some math here where we're actually calculating some of those ship to deliver KPIs.
Mhm.
But as we spoke about, I think one of the most interesting steps happening here is actually in this statistical analysis card, where, I think for most people in this car and on this call, you might be thinking, I'm an ops and supply chain expert. I'm not a data analyst trained in R and Python and programming languages. So maybe you can kind of talk about how, even with that being true, you were still able to do some pretty impressive statistical analysis here.
For sure. And I promise you, I am not well versed in any of those programming languages. ChatGPT is my friend if ever I need to tangle with them. But if we open up this one you have highlighted, this is one where, again, I'm able to pull our median 80th percentile, 90th percentile, just to get a snapshot of what the distribution across our origin points. So we have 2 facilities within our main 3PL network. What dates or when did I expect things to ship or deliver? How long was it taking? I can run that across a day, a week, a month. But doing the Parabola, when I initially found Parabola, was very good at doing averages. So there's average steps. There were no percentile steps. Percentiles is a relatively, or in my experience, has been an atypical way of thinking about this. So it wasn't unsurprising. So we had to do a lot of workarounds in our early phases or versions of this flow to get to the percentiles. And what that meant was many, many steps to add rows. So basically, you just had to do a count. So you basically had to create the percentile yourself by finding the number of rows, grouping by whatever group you need, identifying, okay, if there's 120, or for easy math, there's 100 rows in this group, well, then the 90th row is what I need for 90th percentile. And then doing lookups back to get that information. It was very messy. I have a different flow for my 3PL flow that was, I think, hit the limit. So it was at like the 400 step limit mark for a flow. And Daniel, one of the Parabola folks that I work with, looked at it and was like, yeah, this is not efficient. It was taking forever to run. So he took it upon himself to go in and back it down. And he backed it down a ton. But even like that was before AI steps as well. So there's probably another version we could create, which we could actually probably back it down from 400 steps to 50, right? Just by using the AI to do all this work.
Really cool. And I think maybe takeaway for folks on the call is you have this time-consuming data work. Maybe you're thinking about hiring an analyst. Maybe you're wondering if you need to like zhuzh up your programming knowledge. This is just a really easy way to say, like, I know what I want to do with the data. Let me just tell Parabola and can kind of take action, generate custom code, understand exactly what's happening all within the data set here. And so as I zoom out, you'll see a couple other really cool visualizations here. One of them, Vince, maybe we'll give you a chance to talk about your area chart, and a little line chart we got here before we shift to Q&A.
Yeah, for sure. Love a great area chart. So this one here is just, this is really more of like an audit. So someone asked me, how do I inspect, or asked in the chat, how do I inspect to make sure things are running beyond having triggers in email? So that if there's an error occurs at certain pieces, I'll get an email set up to say, hey, something's not right. This thing didn't run. I can go in and audit and make sure it works. But I also use or create steps to be able to audit to make sure data works, or the data is working the way I want it to. So this is one where every day I run this view, and I should expect that the previous week should be creeping up to the 100% or close to the 100% ship mark.
Very
So
cool.
if it's not, then there's either one, a data issue, which I've had in the past, where there's just a hiccup. There's either the OMS hasn't updated, so they just have a data pipeline issue on their side, or the connection here has broken. But I use this to say, hey, the first on a Monday, it's okay. We're only about 10% of the previous week delivered. If we're at 10% on Friday, something is going seriously wrong, or shipped. Sorry. So that's really for me. I don't report this to anyone else. And then this DTC time in transit, again, this is just one to track between our two origin points. How are we performing? So theoretically, they should be fairly similar. Or in theory, the UT1 only does the western third of the country. Should, in theory, be a bit better, except for it's a pretty wide area that we're shipping to. But this is just a way to be able to compare the two and identify, again, if there's an issue I need to bring back to our 3PL to help fix.
Very cool. And to some folks asking kind of like, how is AI used in this part of the flow? We're kind of using AI throughout this example to clean the data and ultimately get it into a format so that we can do this analysis. And then if we wanted to take a step further, just jumping back to the other flow for a quick second, one other way we can use AI to help us with these visualizations in this example, I'm asking, how should I interpret the data in this specific visualization? And Parabola can kind of give you an overview of how we're calculating those metrics and then exactly what we're looking at those visualizations. So Vince, thank you very much for walking through this one. I want to save a little bit of time for the group to ask any questions that you might have in the chat here.
Yeah.
So
I see one from Umar. So is there a good option to utilize dashboards to consolidate different charts into a single view? Short answer is yes. So the way we do it at Vacation is any data that we want to push into an exec dashboard, for instance, that's one that my boss and the leadership at the company are looking at daily. I will just push that I'll build what we call a parabola table. So I basically just build think of it like a mini database that I can then query off of and pull into any other flow. So then that flow is really just an aggregation of the output of many other flows that we have across our business, but he can see it in a certain way. And then he can also adjust the visualizations the way he wants without impacting the source data.
Right. So you have your sacred place for doing your OTIF ship to deliver analysis, and then can also create a consolidated dashboard for leadership to have that same visibility, just copying and pasting some of the same visualizations over if you so choose. I see another question in here about if you can actually take the output of that flow, run it back through the model to provide insights on drivers of the KPI. Vince, how do you kind of think about understanding root cause based on the data coming out of this flow?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I definitely run that. So that audit step that I was telling you about is probably the main place where I push a lot of this data to be able to review. Honestly, because we're in it every day, between my direct report and me, I'm unsurprised by the results when they come out the next week. However, it does give you insight, and there are things or customers we might not see on a daily basis. So being able to aggregate in that way is very helpful. Also, being able to aggregate the impact is even better. So I know which SKUs that we're out of stock of or we have some challenges on, but I don't necessarily know within the week or within the month what the true impact has been in terms of units lost, POs impacted. This allows me to do that very easily. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, wonderful. Vince, I'm curious for someone who's maybe thinking about starting to leverage AI, use automation, based on your experience, what would you recommend for beginners getting started with their first couple automations?
Yeah, so I'd say first thing is listen to a lot of Adam. So I remember starting earlier on, he did a lot of the tutorials, the startup tutorials that I thought were extremely helpful. Again, I'm very visual, so not having to read a document or just kind of putz my way through it, but he has a lot of videos. So a lot of the tutorials are video based with examples that I could very easily then pour it into my own data to start to play around and learn the system. So I'd say leverage all those tools. They're super useful. They're probably the most useful set of tools I've seen to get started on a Parabola University. That's exactly it. Beyond that, I think having the AI chatbot now is definitely a thing that I know I would have leveraged earlier on. Full transparency, like as the AI chatbot was coming out, I was telling folks like it's very helpful, but I'm no longer a beginner or novice. Um, at the same time, so I just need to find a different way to get value out of it. But I love that every new flow would have you a pop up and just like, hey, what is this doing? How's this working? Which is very useful. So I learn typically by looking at other folks' work. That's how I've learned in the past. So being able to use that function of, hey, what's this thing doing? In general, this card, what is it doing? How do I think about it? Is a very useful tool for folks to understand or find opportunities to improve the efficiency of the reports.
Totally. And to your point about this chat interface, kind of, yes, being very valuable for beginners, where you can just ask, like, how do I build an OTIF reporting flow? And it's going to give you an overview at steps. For more advanced users, we're seeing this a lot for troubleshooting errors, connecting APIs, creating JSON bodies, and helping explain complex parts of the flow. So totally would echo your point around supporting different levels of expertise there too.
Yeah, I said the other thing that's been helpful for me is like make this thing more efficient.
Mm.
So earlier on, like the flows you see here are definitely pretty. The true flows are not necessarily as pretty, and especially the ones I built earlier on that we're still using. We're truly just brute force, make it work.
Yeah.
So being able to go back through, especially when I'm seeing if something's having a run issue or what have you, going in and using the AI chat and saying, hey, this thing's taking an hour to run. What do I need to do? How do I need to reorder these things to get this to a half hour? It's been super useful.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, with the last minute or so we have here, again, thank you all for joining today. Vince, thank you so much for this session. Just wanted to provide a little overview of what else is to come in this webinar series this week. Tomorrow we have Mallory joining us from Tecovas. She's built some really cool flows to digitize invoices from different vendors and track POs. Chris will be joining us from Roan. He's built some really, really cool flows as well to do things like allocate inventory across all their different wholesale partners. On Thursday, we'll have Sam from Janie and Jack. She has one flow set up to digitize invoices from many different carriers in one flow and then track shipments. And then finally, to end the week, we'll have Crystal joining us from Tushy, who built a really awesome financial close model in Parabola and also some flows to digitize invoices from different carriers. With that, Vince, thank you so much for joining today. Any last words you have for the group here?
No, just get building. I'm
Building.
here for you. I'm like I said, listen to Adam, but I'm also here to help in your journey. I love this stuff.
There we go. We appreciate it. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We hope to see you tomorrow. And as Vince said, get building. Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.